we can't actually surrender to fully and to experience a causal emotion. So we can't actually release, which is what's required to release a causal emotion.
Yes.
While there still exists within us any form of resistance to that
surrender.
emotion.
And to surrender
And
as well.
to surrender.
Yes. So if we have resistance to experiencing the emotion, and we have resistance to the process of surrender, which is it's basically resistance to the process of allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by emotion,
Yep.
then you're going to find it very, very difficult to experience the emotional error.
Yep.
Because all emotional error is painful to experience. Mm-hmm. There's always pain associated with emotional error. And as a result of the emotional error being painful, we're going to want to avoid it.
Yeah.
And unless we understand that, that the desire to avoid the emotional error and the desire to be overwhelmed, right, to not allow ourselves to be overwhelmed, I should say,
Yeah.
will cause the resistance to experiencing the emotion.
Yeah.
So sometimes I see people getting close to the emotion, and then this other secondary emotion, which is really a big emotion, kicks in, and that's the emotion of not wanting to be overwhelmed. So they don't allow themselves to be overwhelmed, and so a few little trickles come down their face, and they go, oh, it's wonderful to connect to that. And I'm saying, you haven't even started connecting to that yet. You know, you're allowed to not cry. You're allowed to choose to suppress the big grief that's inside of you that you need to experience.
Yeah. It's so funny talking about it because you're so lighthearted and just joyous and enthusiastic about it. But to me, it's still very much a serious business. So I can feel in this.
Yeah.
So I'm apologising for my seriousness about this but
you have experienced, haven't you, personally, the experience of not wanting to surrender, even though you know the emotion is there to surrender to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel most people have had that experience where they feel an emotion inside of them that wants to come out, and they keep it under control. And that's a fear of surrender or a fear of being overwhelmed by the emotion, which is caused by all other kinds of emotions, like worried about what other people think, worried about what it's going to look like, worried about how people are going to react, and all those kind of things cause those suppressions of that emotion.
Yeah, and false beliefs about survival of emotion, all kinds of crazy
and that it's never going to be
beliefs.
never ending.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel
lot of
that.
people have
It's
that,
like, if I start feeling that, I'll be still feeling that 10 years' time. That's a physical impossibility, actually, with the soul. It's physically impossible to feel an emotion in its pure state for 10 years.
Yeah.
5 years or 3 years, or 2 years or 1 year even. It's physically impossible. If you're feeling emotion for 1 year, then you're not feeling it in its pure state.
Yeah.
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 It's usually hours and sometimes days, and very, very unusual circumstances and conditions, weeks.
Isn't that just kind of crazy to the point of almost farcical?
Yeah.
That we spend so much energy avoiding something that could be over in 2 or 3 hours.
Yes.
And this is the power of these error-based beliefs that create resistance.
Correct.
They are so powerful, aren't they?
Well, they're powerful, but they're not more powerful than God's love or anything. But they are powerful.
We give them power.
We give them power.
Over our life.
We honour them.
Yeah.
Because we have such an honour of fear, we honour the emotion that keeps us locked up. And yet, and in a way, it's sort of like we nurse it in our bosom, you know, we hold it to ourselves, you know, and want to keep it with us the rest of our life for some reason. You know, we have almost this longing to do so. And yet...
I don't feel like that.
Yeah, you do, because you are doing it. See, again.
It's not an
don't,
affectionate feeling, though.
No,
It's not
for many it is an affectionate feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can almost feel the nostalgia in them when they're talking
Yes,
about it.
yes.
And I've had many conversations with you where there is a nostalgia about wanting to hold on to a specific emotion, and that's all about, I want to nurse this thing, I want to feel this way, you know, for the rest of my life if I can, type of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people romanticize pain. And
definitely.
if you've been raised by someone who romanticises pain, you can get nostalgic about your sadness.
Well, because you have an emotional addiction to romanticising pain. Because what happens is you get approval from that parent by romanticising pain yourself.
Yeah.
And that's very dangerous when you do that. It's very dangerous for your own progression.
Yeah.
And these are all blockages or errors
Yeah.
that cause resistance in your soul to the growth
Yeah.
that needs to occur. And this is what I was saying, is just like most people are there holding this stuff to themselves, you know, in almost a worshipful state about the emotion. When I say worshipful, what I mean is they honour that fear above all else. That the fear of the emotion is greater than love, it's greater than truth, it's greater than anything, it's greater than their partner, it's greater than their own children. They'll abuse, you know, by you know, maybe even assault them physically, or even just yell and scream at them verbally just to avoid this pain.
Yeah.
You know, this is telling you that it's greater than your idea or concept of love.
Yeah.
Fear inside of you causes this, and it's sad that it gets to this state, but we need to see that state, and we need to start feeling the emotion in that state as to why that is.
Yeah.
Why are we so afraid to feel pain?
Yeah.
There's a major problem in the humanity. Why are we so afraid to feel it? Now, sure, we have beliefs like, for example, we have beliefs that it will be never ending. Well, that's just a false belief. God knows it's never ending. Like,
That it's not never ending.
God knows that it's not never ending. So God knows that it will end. If you don't know it will end, then you're not connected with God in that state. You know, it's just a false belief you have. You know, God created your soul for all this pain to end. God created this foolproof system where all the pain eventually has to leave you. It will leave you one way or the other. You just got to embrace the process.
Yeah.
And if you understood the process better, you might embrace it more.
Yeah.
That's why we're going through this material of how the soul functions.
Yeah. So on this point, though, we're saying that while there's resistance within us to the state of surrender,
Yep.
we're not going to release surrender towards a causal emotion.
Yep.
We're not going to be able to release that emotion.
Correct.
So we must be willing to feel the error
And feel the resistance. We've got to feel the reason why we don't want to be overwhelmed by that emotion.
Yeah.
That's what we've got to feel.
Yeah.
That's the error we've got to release. Feel why you don't want to be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of judgments on this planet about emotion. Man, the amount of criticism we get from people about emotion, it's intense. You get that criticism every single day in your life. You know, it's society-based criticism about feeling emotion. And this is why most of us don't do it.
Yeah.
Because we're so afraid of society, we're so afraid of what everyone else thinks, that we don't go through the natural process that a child goes through, that God created us to go through to release error and embrace truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Have I interrupted you?
no, that's all right. That's all right. I feel that what you're saying is so important.
Yeah.
But, and I don't want to make it too jumbly for the listener, but we're talking about the need to surrender to causal emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about removing the error which creates the resistance to that state.
The resistance to surrender.
Yes, to the state of surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier on in your introduction to this principle, you said something. You said that there's not much resistance in grief.
Mm-hmm. True grief.
Yes. So
grief is the causal emotion.
Yes.
Right? So when a person is feeling true grief, usually in that state they're not resistive to their emotion. It's quite good. You know, usually by the time a person's got to that state, they've already gone through all the resistances needed to get to that state. Right? So generally most people, by the time they get to true grief, and I'm not talking about manufactured grief or rebellious grief or angry grief or any of those other types of things which are not grief at all, but rather rebellion.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the true feeling of grief within the soul. Then usually most of their emotional impediments about feeling that emotion have disappeared by that stage about that particular subject.
Yeah.
Right. It's the process of getting there which is littered with huge amounts of resistive emotions, huge amounts of error-based emotions and error-based beliefs, which are all emotional, which cause us to not want to be overwhelmed by grief. right? And that is usually the work we need to do. Finding them and releasing them. Feeling them is the only way to release them. So you've got to feel every one of them. And that's the work that we need to allow ourselves to go through the process. Now, if you receive some of God's love, it softens your soul to feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more highly likely you'll go through the process if you receive some of God's love. But if you don't receive some of God's love, you're still going to have to go through the process. It's just without God that you're going to have to go through the process. And that's going to be a long, labour-intensive process.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't necessarily recommend. But it's better than not doing it at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're going to choose to do it without God, then at least do it. Don't put it off altogether, you know, which is what most people do on earth.
Yeah.
They put it off altogether.
Yeah.
But the reality is we need to talk later and in another session about the relationship between God's love and how it softens the soul and how it can help all of these aspects of the soul grow and therefore soften the soul into the feeling state that it needs to have in order to progress. But often people have a lot of resistance about feeling God's emotion too. So we've got to talk about these things before they'll even feel some of God's emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Does that answer the point though that you were getting at? Not really.
Not really, but
so what was the point you're getting at?
No, I wasn't actually. I'm not able, obviously by now it's obvious, not able to articulate the point very well.
So what is it you're trying to say?
No, I don't know.
So what's the problem you're facing?
The question,
Why do you feel it's unresolved? There's a reason inside of you why something feels unresolved here.
it just seems...
There's a resistance in your soul. Go on.
Yeah, no, I just think it seems very beautiful and crucial to recognise that by the time we get to feeling the causal emotion, there is very little resistance to truth within us in that place, from what you're saying.
No, only towards that emotion.
Yes.
This is what we must understand, that it's not towards every emotion.
No.
It's only towards that emotion that there's much less resistance to our feeling, right?
Yes.
That's only one emotion.
So on a certain issue,
yep.
when we get rid of a lot of the anger, fear, judgment, shame...
blockages, society beliefs, all these kind of
false
things.
beliefs.
Yep.
All of those things create the resistance that we have to truth around this one subject. We're just talking about one subject.
One subject. It might be, mummy treated me badly.
Or women are never going to love me.
Yeah.
And
just whatever the one subject is.
Whatever the one subject is. And I just thought it was very interesting that you said that once you deal with all of that and you actually get to some causal grief, this resistance that we talked about that prevents the flow of truth into your soul, once you're actually feeling that, you are through it.
Pretty much, yeah. And this is what allows God's love to operate upon your soul as well in that place, because now that you're open to feeling the actual causal feeling that causes you to that causes you to retain this belief, you're feeling and experiencing it. And since you're feeling and experiencing it, it's leaving you. And at the time it's leaving you, truth can enter you. But at the same time now, it's like pouring out water out of a bowl. You can now fill it up again. And if you imagine a bowl turned upside down, like a bottle turned upside down with a lid on the end and open at the top. You try pouring water in the top and it's already filled, all the water goes everywhere and none goes in the bottle, right? So, you know, obviously, if we talk about scientifically, it's a bit different than that, but I'm talking about just general analogy. You open the bottle at the bottom and all that other water goes out. Now, when you pour water in the top, water can go in. Yeah. And your soul is very similar to that. Yeah. The water can go in, truth can go in, while you're letting error out.
And that's, I suppose that's what I was trying to get to, is that in the preamble to this discussion, we talked about the emotional impediment as error that prevents the absorption of truth. And the magic of what you're saying is when we're in a state of surrender to that causal emotion, that emotional impediment is...
It's being released now.
It's being released.
It's being released. It hasn't been completed released.
No.
But it's being released.
Yeah.
So through the process of being released, new truth can enter gradually, of course, as the emotion is released. So if you choose to hold that process up because something challenges you and you don't let yourself be overwhelmed anymore, then you only released a certain amount and the truth will only enter that amount.
Yeah.
And now there's still some kind of resistance that caused you to stop that process.
Yeah.
And you need to find it and let it flow again.
Yeah.
Right? Truth will enter to the extent that you let the error leave.
Yeah.
It's just a simple equation. One is going to have to make way for the other.
Yeah.
Quite simple.
Yeah.
So if we let a little bit of it go, a little bit of it can enter. And this is how most of us process emotion. We let a little bit of error go, a little bit of truth enters, a little bit more error goes, a little bit of truth enters. The reality is that we could allow that process more, but only if we allow surrender and being overwhelmed. And for most people, they don't allow that. They allow dribble here, dribble there, dribble here, dribble there. And try emptying a bottle with a dribble. It's going to take days. If you empty a bottle with a whoosh, it'll take hours or minutes. And this is how our soul works too. There are many emotions in us that we could solve within hours, but we don't allow that process to fully complete. We stop it because of some fear or some other false belief, and as a result, it takes days, months, or even years to make the transition.
Yeah. Yeah. And while we're resisting, we're actually attempting to limit, while we're resisting truth, while we're holding on to error, or the error within us is resisting the truth, then we're just limiting our own growth, aren't we?
Well, this is the sad thing, isn't it? Like, we're there holding on to resistance, saying, I want to hold on to resistance, I need to rebel against the whole process, I don't want to change. And all you're really doing is limiting your own growth, which would result in your own happiness.
Yeah.
So you're limiting so many things. Why would you logically take a step that causes you to limit your own happiness? Doesn't make much sense, right? And this is the sad thing about pain that we don't understand. While we retain the pain within, we are limiting the pleasure that we can experience. It doesn't make much sense to do that. See, this is where logic can be used to help a person get into the reasons why they resist, rather than just, allowing resistance to remain the rest of their life. We need to challenge our stagnation.
Yeah.
And one way of challenging our stagnation is to at least reason with ourselves logically about what stagnation is achieving. And the reality for most of us is stagnation achieves you not having to feel pain.
Yeah, but in the long term...
But in the long term, it creates huge amounts of pain.
Yeah.
So you could actually say stagnation achieves a fixed amount of pain that gradually grows. And the majority of us prefer that than being overwhelmed by pain for a short period of time.
That then decreases. Yeah.
And that's pretty sad.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
That we actually prefer that. So there's a lot in resistance. Of course, we could talk for hours about what emotions cause resistance, what kind of emotions of resistance there are. And when we answer people's questions about emotional processing, emotional growth, we'll probably start addressing some of these issues in more clarity.
Yeah.
So I think later in the week we're doing a section of questions about emotions, and they'll all be referencing the human soul FAQ, because in the end they'll all revert back some way to what's going on with one of these principles of how the soul functions.
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for that discussion, babe, and thanks for your passion and enthusiasm on the topic.
Well, I love how the soul functions. It's to me, learning about how the soul function has helped me immensely in my own life.
Yeah.
And I feel that if everyone on earth knew how the soul functioned, we would drop, honestly, the entire economies of nations would change into focusing on growth rather than focusing on suppression and dealing with the effects of resisting change in the soul. Yeah. So I feel understanding this material has a powerful effect on the individual, but also potentially a powerful effect on humanity. Collectively.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.